Hi everyone, welcome to the session of our web series Fireside Chat with Champions, in which we interview global business leaders, asking them crowdsourced questions. And the idea is basically to ask questions which is relevant to the biggest challenge we face today, that is COVID-19, and its impact on various aspects of business and the way we can steer ourselves in current uncertainties. Today we have a very special guest with us, Aroop Zutshi. Aroop is a global president and managing partner at Frost and Sullivan. Aroop is based in Silicon Valley and has worked with startups and Fortune 1000 companies, helping them design and curate their growth strategies. Additionally, Aroop has worked with governments across the world on their economic development agenda. At Frost and Sullivan, Aroop focuses on globalization of the company and serves on board of the company. I'm privileged to have learned a lot from him, and we keep on crossing each other's paths at a lot of events, more really on the platform at the World Economic Forum. So thanks, Aru, for accepting our invitation. I would request you to let our viewers know a little bit about your current activities. So the floor is yours, Aru.
Perfect. Thank you, Deepak, for this very generous introduction. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm delighted to be part of this session. And so when Deepak mentioned what the objectives were, I was very excited, and I'm very happy that I have this opportunity to present my point of views and perspectives and share them with you. And hopefully you can gain some insights and build your own future. Because one thing I want to tell everybody is don't get discouraged, don't get disappointed. When as a global world, as a humanity, when we go through such crises, and we typically end up going through such massive disruptions every 8 to 9 years, many new things come up. The way we operate, the way the businesses operate becomes very different. And so this is a great opportunity to pivot. So let's make sure that we work as a group together, we support each other. I'm passionate about it. And let's be ready for the rebound, because the rebound will happen. And I can tell you that rebound will be far more exciting. And there is incredible opportunities for all you young entrepreneurs, established entrepreneurs. And of course, this message also applies to all the business leaders who are also watching this particular program. So I remain very optimistic. And I'm hoping that all of you, through my conversation today with Deepak, will see that optimism and be ready for that big rebound, which I think is around the corner.
Okay, thanks, Arup. That brings us to our first question. As you know, COVID is unlike anything world has seen so far, right? That this is one in a generation type of things which happens. So far, things would be very, very different post-COVID as well. As Arup was saying that there would be a strong rebound, and that is what we are all hoping for. So Arup, how do you see the impact of COVID and the subsequent economical downturn, specifically on startup ecosystem? So we would like to understand a little bit about on that from you.
Yeah, I think great question, Deepak, but let me contextualize this a little bit. Bottom line is, if you look at all organizations, whether they are the Fortune 1000s of the world, whether they are entrepreneurs of the world, the reality is all of these organizations during good times and difficult times want to grow their business, because it is only when you grow your business there is opportunities for companies to both survive and thrive. And what we are finding is that whether it is economic recession, whether it's a pandemic like the one that we are experiencing now, growth has become very difficult. At the same time, 95% of companies you talk to today, including entrepreneurs, you find growth is the number one objective and remains number one irrespective of the situation. Now, growing is a perpetual challenge, and I like to call them as there are about 8 strategic reasons why companies are unable to grow. And again, my message is common to both entrepreneurs as well as established companies. For example, the disruption of the supply chain, or the competitive intensity, for example. In this particular case, I like to call it a political chaos. What does that mean? When you have a pandemic of this type, it creates a political chaos, which is what results into an economic disruption in the world. And that's what we are seeing right now. So in effect, every industry in the world has been affected by this. Some positive, some negative. I would call many industries have had a positive net impact, some have negative net impact. And what I mean by that is the tourism industry, for example, the airline industry, the hospitality industry have had major negative impact. If you look at industries like healthcare, if you look at industries like ICT, energy, have all seen a positive net impact. But within these industries also, there are segments of the market that are experiencing a positive and a negative impact. Let me share with you healthcare. Today, if you talk to anybody, they'll say healthcare industry is booming. And the answer is yes, but it's also no. For example, while many parts of healthcare segments are going up, anything to do with hospital surgeries, etc., have been all delayed. So there's a big drop in that segment of the market. The elective surgeries that were done have all been delayed, and that's one of the reasons why many healthcare companies that are involved in that space are being negatively affected. So the reality is every industry has been affected, and that is why this is one of those unique cases that we have seen. So entrepreneurs who are serving any of these industries will also see a net positive impact or a net negative impact, especially if you are in an entrepreneurship venture where you're dealing with goods and services, right? Those will have a massive impact. So for example, if you're involved in making products, you're trying to bring products together and then serving to the customer, those will be affected because we know the supply chains have been affected world over. China is still a big part of supply chain because they got hit first. Everybody around the world has been hit because of China. So that's one reason. However, if you're a startup, let's say, for example, in edtech, agri-tech, if you're in the digital platform business, it has no impact in a way. So you as an entrepreneur should see your market going up and up and up. And I think a common example that everybody knows today is what happened to Zoom, the video conferencing platform that saw numbers grow up astronomically because everybody was now getting onto a digital platform to communicate with each other. So like that, even in the entrepreneurship world, we are going to see this impact. Now, besides supply chain, of course, there are other things that are going to impact the entrepreneurship world as well. One is, of course, access to capital. I think anybody in the entrepreneurship world, and there are thousands and thousands of companies that are involved, anybody who's involved in the digital side, I don't expect anything in terms of massive impact to them. They should see their businesses continue to survive and thrive, and they can continue to get funding. So if you're in the areas, like I said, fintech, edtech, agri-tech, I think telehealth, I think those are areas of incredible opportunities for growth. But if you are in areas where you're developing a product, you're involved with, let's say, the tourism industry, you're involved with the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry, the food industry, I think those are going to see some downturn and impact, and you might see funding go away. The third most important thing for entrepreneurs is, how do you get your team working? Because one thing challenging when you're working remote is bringing the team together, keeping the team motivated, keeping the team inspired is not very easy. Because in the entrepreneurship world, you're working together 12 hours, 14 hours a day, and you don't get that chemistry if you're working out of your respective home. So that will have a bit of a negative impact for the entrepreneurship world as well. But again, my message to all entrepreneurs is don't give hope. This is the time for you to invest in your product, your solution, your platform, your service. Be prepared for the rebound and make sure you're fine-tuning your strategies to be able to take advantage of that rebound. Okay, so work on that, be flexible, deliver great value to your customers, make sure you are in regular touch with your customers so that when you're out of it, you can build with those customers much greater than what you've done so far. So that is how I would like to position the impact and the opportunity for entrepreneurs. And many of my comments are applicable for large and medium-sized enterprises as well.
Perfect. So Arup, actually, I was planning to ask you something similar on the large enterprises, but actually you've covered different sectors. So I would like to rephrase a little bit of what I was planning. The next question, going to a little bit more specific. So Arup, you highlighted actually that tourism and travel industry are, we all know, are going to be having challenges. So I would like to understand a little bit from you the entrepreneurs who are working, for example, on creating digital product for the booking of the hotels, booking of airline tickets and all that. How do you see them coming out of this challenge? At the same time, two sectors you said actually which are also very close to my heart, that is edtech and fintech. You see that they would be those sectors for the future. So can you elaborate a little bit on these three sectors for our viewers to have a little bit more understanding from your wide experience?
Sure. So let's focus first on the tourism sector, which includes, of course, the airlines, that includes the hotel chains, conferencing facilities, conferencing centers, marriage bureaus, and areas of that type. I think because of social distancing norms, we will see a relatively longer time for recovery from these particular segments of the market. And because the reality is, as long as we don't have a vaccine solution to the current crisis, we will see a up and down in the economy in the coming 2 to 4 quarters. So you will not see, even though many governments worldwide have started to uh, open up their economies in a very controlled fashion, but what we will likely see is an improvement, a little bit of a fall, an improvement and a fall. And so what's going to happen is, because of that, many people will still be hesitant to get on a plane or get on in a train or travel to different locations. So I do believe that in the next 12 months, the travel, the tourism, the airline industry will continue to remain soft, and therefore anybody serving that particular segment, I'm afraid, will face challenges, because if people don't move, there is simply no way for those industries to recover. It's the reality. There will be a lot of uh, tourists who travel, and especially from countries like India and China, which now are dominating ethnic groups that now travel worldwide. You will see them hesitating to drive, because the social distancing norm will force them to be quarantined when they return back to their home country, and that's a big disruption in their life. So if you have to be in a hotel or in a room for 14 days because you can't enter your own home, that becomes a problem. So I'm afraid that this part of the segment will continue to face, and it is a reality we have to deal with. Having said that, on the other side, which is the edtech side, the fintech side, and of course the agri-tech side, I see tremendous opportunities for growth, because I think what is very clear now, that you can deliver great value, great content, great education, online testing. All of these elements have already been put in place. Many schools, many universities, many higher places of higher education had already started these online courses and online programs. So we've got the robust infrastructure. We've got the ICT backbone already available in most countries in the world, and therefore delivering great education is very much now possible. And that is why these industries will continue to grow. It's becoming very easy now to deliver value. And I do believe that over time, especially in the edtech area, we might see some very interesting disruptions. For example, today you have to go to a university to get a degree. A brick and mortar school, spend 4 years, sometimes 5 years to get a degree. And we can all agree that through those 4 or 5 years, you get good education, but oftentimes you don't get great education, because not all professors can deliver great value. I think this might open up a new opportunity for us, where if I want to do my BTech in chemical engineering, I could actually take the best courses from 10 different universities, from 10 different Nobel laureates or best professors, and then complete my program and take a degree from one that I feel most comfortable with. And this is something that could happen in the future. That means more and more people around the world can get A plus education, but by not physically going to those brick and mortar locations. So we can see that happening in the future. That's why I think on edtech, on agri-tech, and of course, fintech, we will see some incredible uh, new ways of doing business. New business models will start to come in. I expect new methods of payments to come in as well. So I think we will see a lot changing. The consumer appetite for all of these new things is going to increase. So for anybody who was working in an industry that has very limited future in the short term, may want to look at diversifying themselves into the ed tech and fintech area, because that's where there is longevity of growth and they don't get disrupted even with pandemics of this nature or any global crisis that may hit us in the future. So my advice to people who are in the transportation, in the healthcare, sorry, um, in the uh, in the tourism industry and all of these industries, to pivot and look at these industries as potential areas of growth and opportunity. I know it's easy said than done, but that is something they will have to consider, because recovery and rebound in this will take a lot longer, and it could be 6 months, 12 months, it could even go as high as 2 to 3 years, and that would obviously not be sustainable for anybody.
And I strongly believe that maybe even after, like, things becoming normal, people would, because now you are more comfortable and you have understood the value of digital platforms. I don't feel too many people would love to go to, like, maybe MIT to be on campus for all the 4 years or 2 years. They would love to have a digital platforms where, like, in low cost, without traveling, you will be getting a lot of education. At the same time also, like, if we can get things done on Zoom, right, then why to fly all the way to US? So I believe, like, even once the things become normal, the travel would still be a big question mark, like, because the psyche of the people becomes very, very different when you have 40 days in lockdown. So that is where we are heading for
Great.
the next question. So Arup, actually, like, you're someone who have worked with the top leaders and you understand their mindset. So COVID is just not the healthcare issue. It's also something which is economical, social, as well as business challenge, also a personal crisis. So I would like to understand a little bit about, like, how as an individual, right, who have been put in such a challenging time, be motivated, keep team motivated, and be more productive going forward. So that, I believe, would be something which is very, very critical, because as you rightly said, we don't know, it could be 2 months, 6 months, 8 months. So, like, it's time we start thinking about the impact of COVID also on you as a professional, as well as the personal person. So I would like to understand a little bit on that from you.
No, very true. When you have a crisis of this magnitude, it impacts your entire system. It impacts you at a personal level. It impacts you at a spiritual level, physical level. I mean, every part of your being gets affected by a crisis of this nature, and not just you, your family with whom you are obviously spending now a lot more time. Everybody gets affected. But I think my recommendation to all the business leaders, entrepreneurs, is to do three major areas of focus. One is, of course, be ready for the response. You have to respond to the current crisis. Number two is reset, and the number third is be prepared for the rebound. And what I mean by that is make sure that you're handling your current business. Make sure you are involved with your customers. Make sure you're understanding how the customer needs are changing. Be extremely flexible, keep your team supremely engaged, keep their morale very high during this time. This is not the time to necessarily eliminate individuals and talent from your organization. You might create systems whereby, together you can work to retain the talent, because you will need this talent when you will come out of this crisis. So that's the first thing I'll encourage everybody to do, is, and then of course focus on making sure that you handle your cash issues and liquidity issues. These are very important. That can be done through multiple ways, including seeking government relief, government grants. A lot of the governments worldwide are pumping in stimulus packages, and many of the companies, including startups, are eligible for that. So apply for that so you can get access to those funds and reduce the burden on your current system. So that's the first thing I would recommend everybody to do. The second is about resetting. And again, what I mean by resetting is reset your payment terms, for example, with customers. Give them extended payment terms. Talk to all your suppliers and see if you can push your accounts payable. Talk to all your companies from whom you rent office spaces. Ask your landlords to be flexible and push those, defer those, extend the contracts. So reset your business model so you can make sure that you are still managing your business and keeping your business intact, keeping your people intact. Because if you lose your good people, that will make it harder for you to rebound. Then the third phase, which is where I would encourage you to spend a lot more time, and that is to be prepared for that future. So the first thing I will say to all the leaders is to invest in your future. Look at your competitive intensity. Look at new business models. Okay. Look at new ways of engaging with the world. And I will say, if you haven't digitized your business, now is the best time to digitize your business and look at new ways of growing your business. Look for new growth opportunities. And I can tell you, there are millions and millions of such opportunities that are available, that will become available. And I will also tell all the leaders, I have studied the last 4 major crises. And every time we went through crisis, we rebounded with some very, very innovative solutions. Okay. Some of the largest multi-billion dollar corporations have emerged from these crises. And that's why I'm saying, please invest in your future, build a growth pipeline, bring your executive team together and brainstorm which growth idea you want to pursue, build a plan for it, put an implementation plan for it, and start to put the foundation for it so that when you come out of it, you are ready to take the business to the next level and recover whatever losses you had during the crisis. And that's what I would recommend to everybody. And if you do that, I think as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, you will see yourself absolutely prepared for the future. So invest in your future will be my message to everybody.
Right. So Arup, actually, like based on your huge body of work with the government agencies, right? You have advised the government. So I'm taking a little bit of deviation from my general areas of question. I was interacting very recently with some of the governments before the G20's, the agriculture ministers meeting. They had a virtual meeting for G20. That was on 21st of April. One common area of concern by most of the government today was about the food security. So you'll find that a lot of these G20 nations, like specifically when we talk about Middle East and Europe, they do a lot of imports, and because the supply chain has now broken, they are seeing a huge crisis unfolding towards the food security. Uh, Not taking just focus on food, based on your experience, we would like to understand how governments should tackle this issue of broken supply chain. And the broken supply chain has led to something what we have seen, the China being someone back office for manufacturing, that is going to change substantially. So can you share a little bit of your thoughts on that area where actually like it could act as some advisory to the governments?
Certainly, as you know, I have had the opportunity of working with governments on their economic development agenda, and typically agriculture, precision agriculture, agri-tech are big areas of focus for most governments worldwide because it's the base of economy in many countries, and especially whether it's developed or developing countries, it's a big part of it. So clearly, food security is a big issue now. It was there even before COVID. It remains a big issue now. And what I'm advising a lot of governments is to help the farmers, help the agriculture community in building an infrastructure to be able to do mass acquisition of goods and services and use their infrastructure to bring those products to the marketplace. The biggest challenge we now have is many of the farms are producing, but they're simply not able to transport them to a place of consumption. So there's a gap between production and consumption. And the message I'm giving to all the governments is use your infrastructure, which is lying idle right now, that whether it's rail systems or traffic systems, use that to bring these products to the marketplace, even if it means lower price points, because we know through this crisis, millions and millions of people have lost wages, have become unemployed, have become underemployed, have simply no resources to be able to get access to basic necessities of life, which is food, clothing, and shelter. And so, if they can bring that, it will ease the pressure. And whether we like it or not, governments have the ability to do it. And that will also mean that a lot of the food that does get produced or milk that gets produced is not lost, is not wasted, and it finds the right market or right place for people to consume it. So my message is use the infrastructure to bring this to marketplace, because if you don't do it, the pain and the suffering will continue for a much longer period of time. So stimuluses will be good, but availability of this will be equally required. And that supply chain is to a large extent very domestic. It is not an international supply chain like you have in manufacturing. So yes, if you're making an electronic product, you're making a car, you're making a big capital equipment. For that, you have to depend on ecosystems like what you have in a country like China and some other parts of the world. But when it comes to agriculture, you don't necessarily need that ecosystem. You can do it from farmland to small cities, from small cities to large cities. These can be done very, very quickly. With even a broken supply chain, you can make it work. So I think that's the message to all the governments, to focus on that and get it. New systems like bartering could be a very good way to do it. So if you grow a certain type of crop, you can barter with another village that produces the other type of crop. So this way, both areas get the finite amount of food and therefore can still survive and thrive while this crisis gets over. So I think there are multiple ways. Of course, subsidies, etc., will be required to farmers, because a lot of farmers worldwide uh, live or borrow a lot of capital for their cash flow needs from banks and other institutions. So that will be required. But I think the supply chain can be fixed relatively quicker, because a lot of the supply chain is domestic as opposed to international for electronic products. That would be my advice to governments.
As rightly articulated, I strongly believe that while a lot of countries were seeing their farmers as a liability so far, they start seeing them as an asset going forward. Right. So that brings us to our last question. So as you have explained earlier in this talk, that the disruptions and economical downturns have led to creation of some of the multi-billion dollar companies. What would be your 3 silver bullets for an entrepreneur startup enthusiast currently, right, that they should be focusing on to be after 5 years among those companies?
So I like to call them unicorns. I think unicorns have been typically unicorns have emerged typically out of these massive crises. But like I said, I think if you look at areas where there is an opportunity for unicorns to develop, I think it will be in the area of healthcare. Healthcare will look very different. It's one of those industries that will be completely transformed once we come out of COVID-19 crisis. And therefore, I think digital health will be a great area of opportunity. Remote patient monitoring, remote care, online care, telehealth, big areas of growth and opportunity. And that's why I think if anybody has knowledge and interest in that space, I think that's a great area of growth. But if you are in the manufacturing sector, then there's growth in anything related to automation. So if you are involved with AI, you're involved in machine learning, you're involved in IoT, Industry 4.0, I can tell you factories will be a lot more automated in the future. Robotics will be a big part of our future. I expect not only robotics coming into the industrial area, it will come into the consumer area, and eventually you and I will also have robotic assistants working with us, and these will be at price points that we can all afford, which is equal to our mobile phone price points. So that's another area where I see tremendous opportunity for growth. I think the other area that I expect that will grow big time will be related to areas that deal with consumer hygiene. So anything to do with consumer hygiene, whether it's personal protection equipment, whether it is related to creams and hand washes and sanitizers. I think access to that, availability of that, with stockpiles that will happen in the future, I think is another area of incredible growth. Last but not the least, if you're doing anything in digital, if you're doing anything in digital, I think there is incredible opportunity for growth. And my recommendation to everybody is build that capability. And with 5G coming in now or in the very few future, you will be able to provide many things that were difficult to do under the current infrastructure. And that's why digital content, big data analytics, digital media, all of these areas are areas of tremendous growth and opportunity. So to all the entrepreneurs, I say, don't get discouraged. There is more coming your way. And because your mindset is one of disruption and you look to do new things, I consider this is by far one of the best times for all of you to think out of the box and be ready for what I consider as a great future for everybody.
As usual, it's always a privilege to have discussion with you. I learned a lot from this discussion, and I'm very sure that our audience would also learn a lot, and they'll adopt most of what you have said to become a successful unicorns going forward. Thanks a lot, Aroop, for your time, and it was a privilege, as always, talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepak. Thanks for having me on this session. Thank you. Bye-bye to everyone.
Yeah, bye.